Welcome to our podcast, where we resurrect the spirit of Nigeria's historic society of creatives. The Mbari Club was founded in 1961 at the University College Ibadan and nurtured geniuses like Achebe, Soyinka, and Fela. In each episode, we explore the craft of today's artists, preserving the stories of the storytellers that are shaping our generation. You guys are always giving me all these very, very polite political answers. How are you doing? Good. Today's guest is the poet, playwright, and producer committed to amplifying and archiving untold stories. Her work on memory and black feminist theory has appeared in BBC, The Republic, and Africa Writes. She is currently a PhD researcher in literary practice at the University of Warwick. Moving beyond her profile to explore her process, please welcome Lanaire Aderemi. Hello, Lanaire.
Hi, Nnamdi.
How are you doing?
Very well, good.
You guys are always giving me all these very, very polite political answers. How are you doing? Good. How are you doing?
Right now, this moment, I feel very grateful. I'm a bit tired just because I've had a very busy week. I saw there's this post that Davido tweet rather he made a long time ago where he said that like if your weekend is sweet, when is Wednesday that you know it. And I feel like my weekend is going to be sweet.
You know it already.
I can feel it so strongly.
Lovely.
So I'm excited for the weekend.
Lovely. That's very good to hear. That's very good.
How are you?
Man. Okay, I was about to give you my own political answer. I usually say I'm alive.
Okay.
But yeah, let me see. I don't know how my weekend would be, to be honest. So it's been that kind of week. Everything has been going on. I typically have a lot of things on my plate. And this week I had even more. So to be honest, I haven't really chilled. It's just been one type of work, sleep, another type of work, sleep. So hopefully my weekend, it goes either two ways when I have weeks like this. Either I just knock out and rest, or I go to my second philosophy, which is play as hard as you work. So I don't know where I'll fall this weekend. Yeah. But let's see how it goes. How's Lagos been in general for you? You've been around for a couple of months now.
It's been very wholesome. I've enjoyed it a lot. I think that the reason why I love Lagos is how it's an environment that really promotes serendipity and spontaneity. And I think those two things are essentials for creative people who maybe have become used to repetition and the mundane. I think that Lagos is also a place where I feel at least a great sense of community. I love the fact that my friends can come to my house at any point and we can chill. I like the fact that, I'm going back to a time in my life where going to my friend's house was an event.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a lot of that recently where, I just tell my friend, okay, I'm coming to your house. And then I have my nap in between me spending time at their house. And
I can't believe you're having naps in Lagos. Just casual midday naps.
Naps are essentials. I think also because it's always sunny. I think the heat also makes me sleepy.
Fair.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most spontaneous thing you've done in Lagos?
The most spontaneous thing.
This is a safe space, right?
Okay, the most spontaneous thing I've done is I basically gone on a date. So it was spontaneous. I had a lovely chat with somebody, and then that evening we ended up going to eat, and it was really fun. So, yeah.
Shout out Lagos men. I think Lagos men get a bad rep, but look at us here doing the Lord's work.
Lagos men, very interesting. Yeah, interesting.
Interesting bunch.
Yeah, I think I've been lucky. I think I've been very lucky. I think maybe if I stay longer, perhaps.
See, you don't even need to lean into what you hear. Let's just stop at what you've experienced.
Yeah, so the agenda isn't,
Okay, then. Spontaneity regarding Lagos men aside, how's the creative process been? I know for you, right, you do quite a number of things. You do a lot of writing, of poetry, of plays. You do a lot of performance as well. How's that been in Lagos?
I was telling someone earlier today actually that Lagos is a city where you can show your workings. Like it's a doing city. I think that London is a dreaming city. So you dream well, you're reflective, you're introspective. Not that you can't do, but for me at least, I find that doing is easier here. And it could also just be where I'm at in my life, where maybe because I'd saved ahead of this trip, so I could, you know, do projects that I've always wanted to do for a lifetime. But I feel like creatively, I feel very, very alive here. I feel very much alive. I feel like my senses are extremely. My imagination has been a lot more like my senses are more alert. I'm more alert.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
more sensitive. The city is noisy, but I think that the chaos and the noise helps me. It grounds me weirdly enough. Although I cannot write, I haven't written a single thing since I've been in Lagos. I just
So
can't write.
Lagos is for living.
Yes, I can't write here, and I thought it was a maybe perhaps me being tired or wanting to just have fun, but I just don't. I've spoken to few friends who are also writers, and maybe who shuffle, and said that they also struggled. So that's the only thing I can say. But I really enjoyed it. I like how, you know, you can wake up one morning as long as you have the funds for it, you can get
Yeah.
things done. I think that I'm someone that has never has never relied on money to create. Like, I think that whilst money is instrumental for creating projects, it should not be what stops you from making something happen. And I think that the fact that I have such amazing friends who have been open to collaboration and also speaking up for me in rooms where I haven't been there and saying a good word, those little things have been seeds as well that they planted. So it's just made my journey here smooth.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. That's good
Yeah.
to hear. Maybe later I'll give some specific people shout outs. But yeah, what you said about displacement is very interesting, right? Displacement in the sense of coming to Lagos and not being able to write. For me, because Lagos is my own primary home, the way it works is I can't write outside of Lagos. So regardless of how alive or sleepy wherever I travel to is, I can write outside of Lagos.
That's
So
such
outside of
a-
Lagos, that's when I do like a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of processing. I think it could be if I'm outside Lagos for a week, if I'm outside Lagos for a year, it doesn't change anything. I can't do any writing outside Lagos.
Maybe you write more where like your home is, I guess.
Yes,
And
yes.
although I have two homes, but your main, your doorstep.
Okay, speaking of homes, right? I know I want to get into your own like early home. I know you started writing relatively early.
Yeah.
You started writing at 8, and that took me aback, right? Because by 8, like I didn't even used to hear word. Talk less about like settling down to do any writing, and also particularly because I know for most people writing is informed by reading. So if I hear you say I started writing at 8, it means I started reading at 8 or before 8, right?
Yes.
What was that like?
So I grew up in a family where you weren't allowed to watch TV before you went to school. You read books. Even in the car, you read. And so we had a big reading culture. My school as well, you were rewarded for reading books. We had a
What
competition.
kind of reward?
So they'd give you a massive applause at assemblies, and you could win maybe like what were the prizes like? Maybe I think books. One of the prizes was
So if you read books, you get more
you get
books.
more
Oh my
books.
god.
but also maybe I can't remember what the prize was like, but there were some good prizes.
They had you guys on strings.
They did. But what that meant was I was a big reader from such a young age. Yeah, that was it really. And in terms of my upbringing and I guess creativity, I I was a very bold and outspoken child, and I still am, but I was also deeply introspective. I remember one of the frequently sort of the things I would always say to people is why. So if you tell me something, I'm like, why?
Okay.
And I'm really grateful that my parents weren't those parents that would say don't ever ask somebody why. They
Like
encouraged
the
me.
typical parent of that generation, where it's
Yes,
like, you're talking too much. You're asking too many
exactly. They,
questions.
they were the opposite. They encouraged me to be inquisitive. They were great rewarders of curiosity, and I think that curious mind and that curiosity really allowed me to blossom creatively. And I remember when I was in year 4, when I was about 8, I won a poetry prize in school,
Yeah.
and that made me feel the sense of accomplishment, but also I remember feeling so confident that this writing path at that young age, it felt weirdly clear. I felt like I was called to do this, and I wrote, every single day.
How old were you again?
I was 8.
God,
Yeah. I was 8.
that's very interesting. Um, so that's when you started reading. That's when you started writing. I want to also try to get into what kind of things you were writing at the time, because on my own end, I remember I started writing properly maybe in my GS3, SS1.
Okay.
And at that time, I was listening to a lot of hip hop. I was writing a lot of hip hop. And you know how they say, like, early creation is imitation. So I was out there in GS3 writing about gang banging and like all of that type of stuff. And it had absolutely nothing to do with anything I knew about, right? But it was just mastery by imitation. So as an 8-year-old, right, like, what comes to mind, like, when you're putting things down as poetry or as stories, like, what are you putting down on the page at 8 years old?
So I remember I wrote things about like observations. So I wrote a lot about Nigeria. So when I was 8, Nigeria just turned, I think it was around maybe when we just, no, 50, maybe 50th independence or 50th or something along
I'll
those
do the
lines.
math later. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember there was a lot of, at the time, I guess, patriotism. So I wrote a lot about the country, about, I remember writing a poem about, or a story actually, about how I really want my local government to fix my road, you know, so that you have a smooth journey to school. But I just remember it was mainly about observations. I wrote about
Yeah.
rain. Maybe when it rained, I just write about that. But I can't really remember the details. I remember in my teenage years, but not so much those
Of those
years.
early
Yeah.
days. Okay. And at what point did you leave Nigeria? And how did that affect your observations?
So I left for my A levels in 2017. And sorry, 2015. Yes,
Okay.
2015.
How old were you?
I was 15.
Okay.
Yes, I was 15. And I turned 16 a month after. And in terms of how it affected my creativity, is that
Life first
okay?
before we get to creativity.
So I was very happy, excited. I could not wait to leave. I was
Now you
counting
first
down.
Jackpot.
Yeah. I was so like, I couldn't wait. But I think it was mainly because I wanted my independence. I was in boarding school throughout my whole life, well, my secondary school life, but I still felt like I hadn't really, I mean, maybe it was just teen angst and, coming of age, sort of, yeah, coming of age sense. But I just felt like there were parts of me that I hadn't fully accessed yet. And I wanted to explore that. And I remember what being in a boarding school that was far away from my parents did was it really allowed me to ask myself deep questions, get answers, and also basically do whatever I wanted to do because I had no eyes on me. And it was really wonderful. And a part of my interests were nurtured around that time. So I remember those were the days where feminism was, coming up really. It was sort of the seeds were being, well, not, they weren't being planted per se because it's always existed, but at least that was my own encounter with it. And I remember being so interested in women's histories. And right now, that's one of the things that I'm so passionate about. So those years were really foundational for my creativity and my purpose and my calling, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And at some point, right, in this journey, you evolved from being just a writer to being a performer.
Yes.
How did that come about?
So I've always performed. I've always loved the stage. As early as 6, 7, I would always be I would be the protagonist in theatrical plays in school. So I would always, my school was very big on on theater. It had a massive theater culture. And so I acted, I danced, I sang, did all those things. And I remember even one of my fondest memories was playing one of the High School Musical characters. And
You guys performed High School
yeah,
Musical.
yeah, we did.
God, when? Like back then, also performing Incorruptible Judge.
Oh my goodness.
What's the other one? Is it Mother's Choice and all this kind of funny? And you're out here doing High School Musical.
Yeah, musical.
Love it for you.
It was so fun. But it was one of the songs. It was A Night to Remember.
So, were you? What's the
Gabriella Trojan. So we did it in a way that nobody could. We're nameless.
It's giving everybody's winning prizes.
Yes, we're all equal. There's no star. But if you're the best dancer, you're sort of the star. But I wasn't. I was terrible at dancing. Absolutely terrible. But I was not bad at acting and singing, so that helped. And so, yeah, I guess early on, I was really, really interested in the stage. And I've always seen performance as an opportunity for me to express myself beyond the page and really get people to know my personality. And how it started off was in 2017, I published a poetry book. It was self-published called Of Ivory and Ink. And that year, 2017, yes. And I came to Lagos, and I remember at the time there was this festival called Lucid Lemons, run by Tomisi Akinwumi. And yes, and I remember I was billed to perform there. And this was my first sort of public performance. And
since
forever.
Since High School Musical.
Yes, since High School Musical, exactly. And so I got on the stage. I remember wearing the Of Ivory and Ink shirts, black trousers, black socks, and black high heel sandals, and a very mini afro puff. And I was on the stage in Muriel Kunola Park, actually.
That's quite a stage.
Yeah, it was a massive stage, and I performed a few poems with some light music at the background, and I really, really enjoyed myself, and I felt this sense of, like, again, this is where I'm meant to be. And so when I went back to complete my A-levels, I tried my best to sign up for open mics. In university, the same thing happened, and then eventually I produced my own shows because I really wanted to have control over the experience that my audience experience and really immerse them in my own world with my stories.
Now, when I first found out about you, right, I think it was when you were trying to promote one of your live performance shows, right? And in my mind, it's like, okay, I get poetry. Okay, I get spoken word, and okay, I get open mics because I do open mics a lot, like, regardless of where I am. Like, for me, is where do they sell local alcohol, where do they do open mics locally, right? Like, those are my things. But with the way you went about it, right, it was totally new to me. And I think that's what piqued my curiosity the most. Especially because, like, it's not something that is very popular here as well, right? People doing very, very elaborate shows around full bodies of works, at least not at the time. Like, now we're seeing quite a few people do it, but I hadn't seen anybody do something like that yet. Definitely not anybody my age or thereabout, right? So what was the process to set it up like? Definitely there is fundraising for stuff like that, I would imagine. And at the very bare minimum, right, you're looping in 5, 10, 15, 20 collaborators. What would you say is like the step-by-step process to getting something like that done?
Thank you for that, for saying that. I did that, and that means a lot. But in terms of the steps, I would say, definitely having the story on the page first. And the way I think about performance is really just making the story even more alive than it is, and trying to think of, my prompt is always never bore my audience. Like, if I feel like someone is yawning or about to yawn, then that's a bad sign.
I like Burna Boy.
I told them to go to the back or leave.
To a degree.
Maybe. And so, so I basically would get a poem, for instance, and my own process involves me thinking of myself as a character. So I create a name. That name was called Verse Writer. And that was my sort of character. And this particular show called An Evening with Verse Writer. But the premise of the show was that I was going through my poetry book of Ivory and Ink, and essentially transporting my audience to Lagos and doing that through poetry, but also through audience interaction. I was deeply inspired by church services, actually. And I didn't realize I was inspired by it at the time, so someone actually theorized it and said, this feels like I'm in church. Because I would get people to say, turn to your neighbor and tell them this, or can you turn and share something, a memory of yours? And I think that a lot of church services are very, they're very, they might not even mean to be, but they are very, very poetic and very comforting. At least I found a lot of safety in that. But also there's a lot of structure. And I think that I adopted that structure of, okay, the same way a pastor might speak to the audience and then in between crack a few jokes if they're, for instance, a Pentecostal pastor, and then get the audience to speak to the person next to them. I sort of was inspired by that as well. And I incorporated that into my work. I also, in terms of collaborations, the way I think about it is, who can I partner with that would make the work even better than it should be? And at the time, I didn't have any money for paying anybody, so I relied on my friends. I remember working with my friend Koye, who played the saxophone, and he essentially was serving as a punctuator. So I told him that you're going to essentially think of yourself as a punctuation mark. Where you say a full stop, I want you to highlight that with the saxophone. Because I didn't want it to be like a full-on jazz, band or whatever. And when I got some more funding, I then hired instrumentalists and singers, and their job was again to underscore my poetry with music so that it felt like a fuller and richer experience for the audience, because even I find poetry very boring at times. And so I just thought, how could I make it more interesting for the everyday person, if they, for instance, just wanted to think differently or experience something that was different. So that was the process. In terms of funding, I think of performances or any kind of artistic projects in a business sense. So I always try to think of it as firstly an MVP. What is the minimum viable product? What is the best thing I can get out of this in the cheapest way? And I remember thinking, okay, in my university, what do I have access to? Classrooms, they're free. So my first ever event was in lecture hall, and then the next one was in a classroom. And I basically said to my friends, pay £5 to come into this classroom. And I got my props from my bedroom. I basically recreated my bedroom into that seminar room. Got my friends to play the instruments, performed it, and arranged the chairs like a church service. So yes, that was the process. And as I got more experience, one gets more experience. I always told my friends, that especially creative people, to just document it, no matter whether you think
How
it's
raw, yeah.
Yeah, you have to document, because what happens when you then want to apply for funding, there's a track record. And I think that's what happened to me, where eventually when I was applying for tens of thousands of pounds, there was a track record of, my own creative experience. And it wasn't perfect, but it was done. And done is better than perfect, as they say. So
how many editions of Evening with Verse Writer did you perform?
So I did one, Tristan Bates in London, Warwick Arts Centre, Coventry Shopfront Theatre. So I've done 3 of it, yeah.
That's mad. I remember I was in London there, definitely, but I remember seeing it on YouTube.
Okay.
And I was watching it with my wife, and she made a comment that made me think about something, and I was like, this is very, very charismatic Pentecostal pastor, right? So you said church service, and in my mind it was like very charismatic Pentecostal church pastor, because like you said, right, there was a lot of speaking to the crowd, a lot of call and response, a lot of also cracking jokes with the people doing the instruments, which is like typical Pentecostal pastor vibe, right?
It's so interesting because I feel like I'm breaking the fourth one up, but it's only through this interview that I've never articulated it like that in my whole life, like a charismatic Pentecostal pastor. But actually, it's true, they do.
You have a future there, maybe.
not I won't be surprised.
How was the spirituality fit into your work?
Very much so. I think that God is the creator and I'm made in his image, and so naturally, like, my creative process itself is a symbiotic relationship with God. I always start off my work by praying. I really, really believe that God is the person that I can co-create with. And so, yeah, it's very, very important with me. I also think that faith for me is deeply personal, and personal in the sense that when I've been creating work throughout my journey, I've always felt like one of the reasons why I was able to refuse any box that was put on me at a young age was because I just felt this sense of purpose and this sense that, again, one of my favorite Bible verses, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I remember just...
That's your sticker as
Yes,
well.
it is. Philippians 4:13. I remember, feeling this deep sense of conviction that I cannot be capped in my life. So if someone was to tell me, oh, you can only be a doctor or a lawyer, I remember being like, no, I can be a doctor and a writer. And I was always refusing boxes. That was something that was very consistent in my childhood. And so I think faith definitely played a big role in allowing me to think big and to think of myself as a multi-hyphenate creative person who can exist in multitudes and, has no sort of, there are boundaries, but you don't have any, I guess, boxes. And then finally, I'd say that it's also given me sort of like a moral compass. I have lists of things I can't do and I don't do and do. And then even the way I treat people with love, with kindness, my faith has definitely informed those things. But yeah, that's it.
I think that's a very interesting way to look at creativity and creation, right? Especially when you talk about boundaries, in terms of having rules and guidelines for what type of stories to tell, how it should be told, and even everything from the things you can say yes to and you can say no to. I think that's something that isn't particularly spoken about a lot, especially like when we're just forming go getter, and by any means necessary, which is also something that's very prevalent in
Honestly,
modern culture.
And I think that one of the Bible verses that I remember at the time looking at over and over again, and weirdly enough inspired by one of King Franklin's lyrics, is like, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? And I think whether or not you're Christian or not, it's a very, very...
it's something to contemplate.
Yes, because it's I always ask myself, at what cost? Okay, this is, for instance, it could be a great advance they're giving you, but at what cost? It could be that it's, a great opportunity, but at what cost, And I think these are questions that I've always asked myself when I'm taking up opportunities or if I decline something, whether it's my mental health or it's, emotionally, or even the fact that I feel like God will not be pleased. Because for me, ultimately, the way I see my existence is that it's supposed to please God. That's why I'm created, to please God, to glorify God, and to express my own self, and be a vessel. I'm only a vessel. That's the way I think of myself. Yeah.
That's sweet to hear, man. That's sweet to hear. Tell me about Blessed Memory. That was I'd say, album.
Yeah, my EP,
mixtape, what are we calling it?
Yes,
EP, right?
Yes.
And it also had like very personal gospel themes, I'd say. What phase were you in, like when you decided to channel that story through, and what did it mean to you?
In terms of what phase I remember it was the start of the year, so I was very excited, as everyone else is, about 2023 at the time, and I just felt like I wanted to challenge myself. And one thing I always ask myself this question every year. On the 1st of January, I say, Lanaire, what is one thing that you are scared to do? And I write it down and I do it. So for me, this year it was...
That's heavy.
Yes, but this year it was creating a film, and, I've done it. And last year it was creating an EP, and I did it. And I remember praying about it, and I felt God tell me, yes, I need you to make an EP about your journey and the lessons you've learned. And I just asked God, okay, well, I can't produce, so I need a producer. Coincidentally, at the time, one of my friends, his name is Yinka Bernie, would been talking about music, and he's a great musician. I think one of the best musicians in the whole world. And I remember saying to him that, Yinka, I feel like you should be making music. Like, you haven't released any music. He's like, no, like, I don't think it's me. I think it's you. And I was like, whoa, like the Spider-Man meme was. And we ended up, he said to me, okay, I have a lot of time right now. And because at the start of the year, didn't have as many projects coming up. And I said, okay, give me some time. And I remember I'm very, one thing I'd say I'm gifted at is hyper focus. So I don't need a lot of time to create work. I can write something in 2 or 3 days as long as I have quiet.
It's giving Shally Poppy.
I've never listened to Charlie Puffy
Oh
consciously.
man, he just dropped his again EP or album,
Okay.
and he was like, "Well, I wrote that thing in like 3 hours." Yeah,
Whoa.
like just one take,
Okay,
3 hours.
maybe I have one thing in common with him. And so I remember I wrote the entire project actually in about 2 days, and it was a very crazy process because it was out of my comfort zone. But I remembered that okay, songwriting is very similar to poetry, so I just had to do a bit of research on the structure and then think of it as a poem. So I did that. I also recorded the voice notes, sent it to Yinka, and then he was so excited. He said, "Okay, let's hop on our Google Meets, our virtual studio." And so we ended up having conversations about it, and the end of it was bless the memory. And in terms of what it means to me, I feel like it represents what I said earlier about refusing to be boxed. I also think that it was I guess, a way to experiment with my own gifts. Someone described the project as Olte Gospel. And and I really think that summarizes the genre, Olte Gospel, yeah, because it draws from a lot of sort of
Charismatic preacher or take gospel. That's a new lane
oh
you're
my
carving out
goodness,
altogether.
honestly, Olte Gospel, because it sounded very. I mean, gospel itself has many subgenres at the moment. It's growing. It's a growing genre, but this particular sound I think was a mixture of a lot of things, a lot of sounds you would hear in a lot of Olte sort of styled songs, and gospel obviously because of the subject matter. But I had interludes from my mom who talked about my name and what it meant to her. And then I also reflected on lessons I learned from my 2-3 years of walking with God in that season. So I talked about patience, about faith, about building my life on a solid foundation, and it was an EP that represented all my reflections in the past 2-3 years, and I'm very proud of it because I didn't realize how powerful music was till I did that, and it's made me even more conscious now of what I consume because people really listen to things and it almost forms, it's engraved in their hearts whether you realize it or not. Because I remember someone coming up to me after a performance saying, I listened to Mustard Seed during my exam season and I had it on repeats because I just felt like I needed a first class and I just needed faith to kind of push through. And I was like, wow, like this is something I was writing in my bedroom, just like I can do all things, and just, it was so personal for me, but to know that it can have a ripple effect and someone else in another part of the world. I got a message from someone in Brazil saying that I love your music. And I was like, I haven't even been to Brazil yet. So there's something so amazing, at least, about how music in particular, not that I think other art forms can do that, but there's something specifically unique about music that just allows you to transcend borders quickly, but also emotionally, it's very...
I agree. I honestly think everyone should not necessarily get into the studio, right? But like everyone should record something with their friends at least once in their life. Yeah. Whether or not they put it out, I definitely think it's something everyone should try to do. It's something that my brother and I always talk about, saying, okay, at some point it's just like get into a studio, like do 1 week there and just like see what our heart and head says, right? And just have it there for posterity. It doesn't have to be something you put on Apple Music or Spotify. Just do it, right? And so like I said, it doesn't have to be a studio. I know you said something about recording voice notes and all of that, right? And you also earlier in the conversation spoke about MVPs for doing something like this, right? Whether it's music or like recorded stuff, what we say is the MVP for the process. So if, for example, there's someone who writes out there and they already have everything on page, which is the first step, as you said, and for them it's just, okay, how do I go to the next step? I don't have Yinka Benny on WhatsApp, but I want to get something like this done. Like, what would you say is the MVP for it?
I think the MVP would be your friends, really. I've collaborated with my friends, and that I think has been the greatest things, the greatest gifts I've had. And the beauty about friendship or working with your friends is that as you rise, hopefully there's no envy or there's no competition, and you're not trying to win somebody because you're on the same level. Practically, I think also submitting work to places that could maybe give you funding or because sometimes you might not have the money for, an amazing producer,
Yeah.
but you might be able to apply for it, or you might be able to raise funding through your friends and family. I remember my first play in university. I needed £300 to pay for the props, costumes, and makeup and all these things. And I just was talking to somebody about my work in the library in school. And that was one of the things I also wanted to highlight is the Bible verse, which I think is an important life principle: ask and ye shall be given. If you don't open your mouth, people don't know that they can bless you. Like, you never get...
Close mouth and get fed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I live by that principle. So I was just, talking about my work. I said, oh, I really, really want to make this play, but I'm really, I've hit this block. And my friend says, at the time, he was like, oh, how much do you need? I was like, well, about £300. And he says, come with me. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll come with you. And me, I was thinking that he was, first of all, because he said he actually needed to go to the supermarket. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to take a walk today. And then he says, okay, he's done in the supermarket. He needs to stop at the ATM. And he withdrew £300 and he gave me that money. And we weren't even close at all. We'd maybe only spoken about twice in the library. But he was convinced by the idea. So I also think that the beauty of MVPs is, first of all, you can experiment, you can test out things, but what people buy into is the heart, the story. It's not about whether you have fancy equipment or you have a name. People always connect to stories, especially when they're very personal and they're real. And I think that was what he connected with, that perhaps maybe allowed him to be so generous. Yeah.
I did take notes. Because I have one or two things I'm trying to finance myself.
Okay.
Right, so no, I'll touch base with you off mic. But yeah, love it.
Favor over labor.
That's one way to look at it. So what else are you working on these days, aside from these things now that are pretty relatively behind you now? I know you have the podcast project, and I also know as a best in education and best in reading babe, you also have your PhD project around the women's riot. Just give us some little, insight.
Yes. So my PhD itself is on the Egba Women's Revolt, which is a movement that took place in the 1940s in Abeokuta. Essentially, women were organizing protest strikes, petitions against the colonial taxation that was imposed by the British. And I think this movement is so important because, for me, it was a very innovative, creative, and highly communal event. It was an event that celebrated, I think, courage, creativity, and community spirit of Abeokuta women at the time. And I should say that it was also inspired by the Aba women of the southeast or the east. Oh, yes. And my PhD is a multidisciplinary project that essentially tries to document that event through different creative modes, from literature to not music, to theatre, to film, and also audio drama, which is where Story Pod comes in.
So you're creating multiple bodies of work around this one story.
Yes. So I spent 3.5 years now doing that. And well, I'm on my 3.5 year. I've done 3 years doing that.
Fair.
Yes.
And I'm assuming the Story Pod is the first manifestation of
it. Yes, that was in 2021. Okay. It was actually done during my master's, but it spilled over to the first month of my PhD. But I worked with an amazing production company called Lupify, who specialize in creating immersive sound design. And we worked to creating 4 episodes on untold Nigerian histories. And one of that was on the Egba Women's Revolt. And since 2021, we've essentially created immersive experiences in real life for people to experience the podcast, but also connect with other storytellers, discuss history, and also ask questions. It's almost like a town hall. That's the way I like to think about it, but with food. And so we've had one in Lagos, or 2 in Lagos. We've had 2 in London. I've also spoken at universities. I'm having one in Cape Town. Sorry, not Cape Town. Somewhere in South Africa. It starts with an S. I can't pronounce it. Stellenbosch or something like that. Yeah. And in New York as well. So it's touring at the moment. So that's what I'm working on. And I'm also working on distributing my film my film. It's called Record Found Here, and it's a film.
What's it about?
Yeah, so it's a film about the Egba women's revolt, but mostly about how I'm trying to fill the gaps of history. This history is to do with the Egba women's revolt, so it's deeply autobiographical. It's personal. It's looking at personal history and the importance of preserving history, but it's also exploring oral testimonies, historical records, and official documents to piece together this. I think one of the most brilliant stories in Nigerian history that deserves documentation. And so that's what the film is about. And we screened the film on the 29th of June. It had its world premiere in Lagos. And I'm just really excited for people all over the world to see it. And will be on YouTube at some point.
Well.
So,
okay.
Yes.
And pending, for people who don't get to see it, and pending when it's released on YouTube, right? What would you say is the most like interesting like sub story that you've discovered within it, right? It could have been something you learned from someone you met, or something you read somewhere.
Okay.
What was like the most intriguing sub story you've discovered while learning about the women's revolt?
Ooh.
Take your time.
So I learned. Okay, so I interviewed my grandparents, and they were, although they didn't witness the revolt, the purpose of interviewing them was to give the audience context into why I was doing this. And the why was that I grew up in a family that is obsessed with documenting memories through photography. And I remember when I interviewed my grandpa, I asked him, Grandpa, we have so many photo albums in the house. Why do you keep them? Because when I was younger, it was actually like an activity, hobby for my sister and I to go to my grandparents' house. As soon as we sit down, we're going through the latest photo album. And I asked him this, and he said that his mom passed when he was about 3 or 4. And the only thing that he had left of her was a photo of her. And that was his connection to her. And he still has that photo as his WhatsApp profile picture to date. And he named my mother after his mother, Adebimpe. And I'd never heard him tell that story before. He looked like he was about to cry, but he had this, there was this sort of assurance of how powerful photography was for him. And I didn't even think of my grandpa as someone that was into photography for that reason. I mean, he's written books. He was an estate surveyor, but I didn't, I never saw that. And basically, I didn't know there was any emotional connection to creating photos. Sorry, to documenting in that way. And the second sub story would be interviewing a group of women who said that Funmilayo and Sam Kuti really inspired them. They said that her action made them more courageous about their own futures and also about taking bold steps as women. And I thought that was just so amazing that one woman's decision to stand up for herself and other people has, again, ripple effects. And I was very, very inspired by that story. And they were very, very generous in their sharings. They revealed some secrets that I couldn't even put on camera. But
that's the tea we are looking for.
Yeah. I mean, just some things about the king. That's what I would say. And so it was a very, very. I learned so much from that process, and I felt so. I just felt the sense of like honor. It's honor and humility, because you're honored to be able to be a custodian of that history, but there's a sense of humility because you become aware of how responsible you are for this gold. It's gold because it's rare, but it's also precious, and it's a tender thing. It's precious, it's wonderful, it's delightful, but there is also a duty I have as a storyteller to document this and awaken people's imagination so that they can make sense of history, whether it's personal or collective.
Lovely. Thanks for sharing, and I think I'm really looking forward to like getting into it as well in the different forms it comes out. Work aside and creativity aside and napping aside, what's your day-to-day like these days?
My day-to-day... So because I'm in Lagos at the moment, my day-to-day is more emails, pitching, meetings. I'm honestly just project managing at the moment, project managing events. So it just looks like, emailing, just a lot of emails, a lot of meetings, a lot of working, delegating, talking to teams. But when I'm in London, it's more waking up in the morning with tea, praying, journaling. I mean, I still do those things in Lagos. I love tea so much. Like I'm such a tea lover.
You should have done tea today. Then.
Yeah, tea would have been good.
Yeah.
But I had tea actually at 16 by 16. They have the best
brilliant tea. Ads.
They have great tea. But yeah, in London I would wake up, to have my tea, pray, journal, and then write. So I have a rule when I'm there where I must get work in 4 hours done. As long as I get 4 hours of work done, I can stop. So I can split it across the day, but I must get work done worth 4 hours. Yeah, 4 hours.
That's kind.
Yeah, it's kind. That's the amount of time I read in a scientific report that actually even 9 to 5ers only really spend 4 hours doing focus work, deep work.
I will beg to differ.
Really?
I will beg to differ.
How many hours do you think that you spend doing deep work?
It depends on the day, but 4 hours is easily a bare minimum.
Really?
Easily.
But of focus and deep work?
Easily a bare minimum.
Wow.
I mean, like, take away time spent pressing phone, and like play with my food and all of that, right? Like 4 hours is
the minimum.
If I have like 4 hours of like heavy work, I go to bed, like I can't sleep because like
there's more to do.
You're stealing money from your employers.
Fair enough. Maybe because for me it's writing. So writing for longer than 4 consistently seems like quite a lot. Yeah. It's quite a can be a bit draining.
It's a very interesting way to look at it, right? Because even when I'm writing, the way I look at my focus work, I always say I can do 4 hours a day in front of the laptop, right? But like every other moment that I'm thinking about one component of the story in my own mind, though, I'm logging it as focus work. So I could be out socializing and drinking with folks, and I'm thinking about a character, and people are saying funny things, and I'm like opening my notes to like sharply copy humor.
And it's so interesting. I agree, and it's part of the research. Writers, we love that word research.
Yeah.
But I think that it's so interesting because I also think that's probably my biggest sort of the thing I'm trying to work on. I don't shut down very easily because even when I'm experiencing joyous things in life, I constantly want to document it. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this could be a good part of my play, or this could be a character I could preserve for a short story. It's like my brain is always on creatively.
I have a suggestion. I think I know how you could step down a bit.
How?
Indulge Lagos men more. There we go.
No, I'm good. I'm very. I thought I was so scared you were going to say like maybe like I don't know, drink. I was
no.
Because I don't.
No.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't push you in that direction. But yeah, thanks for spending time today. Thanks for chatting. Hope you had a great time.
Thank you for having me. I discovered that I have charismatic tendencies. And
what are you going to name your church?
Favor over Labor.
Everybody had it here first.
Favor over Labor is my church.
International Ministries or just ministries?
I think just
global.
It's always global. Always global, yes. Always. Probably that.
Okay then. Yes. So thanks for being here with us, Prophetess Lanaire.
No,
Favor over Labor, International Global Ministries.
Oh my goodness. What would you name your church?
I wanted to say I can't speak my mind now because my church people will now hear this thing. They'll now start looking at me funny on Sunday.
No, don't.
Let's leave it at that.
But it's a safe space.
I haven't thought about it, right? What I was going to say was, if you see me leading a church, like, don't come, right? Because I'll be on some fake shit.
Oh my goodness.
Never. Yeah, which is why I didn't want my church people to hear that. Right? I'm a good follower. I don't know if I'm a good church leader, but I think I'm a decent church follower.
Maybe followers of Christ could be the name of the church.
No, I'm an Igbo man now. Okay. I need to. Yes, to have a lot more. More flamboyance.
I see.
Yeah. So when I have it figured out, I'll let you know.
Let me know. Fair enough.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.